Hello and welcome, and today we're talking about one of my favourite shows of the last decade or so, and one that is a true example of how sometimes the thing that you think is fantastic and great and love is not appreciated at all by the nightmare capitalist society that we live in, who guts it and strips it down despite it performing well because Disney sucks, I guess?
The character remains in the show, but a few lines of dialogue that reference gender identity are being removed.
Disney sucking seems like a pretty fair takeaway from anything, but let's get more into that and what happened to the Owl House down the line. Because first things first, we need to introduce what this amazing show is all about. The Owl House is an animated children's fantasy series with drama and comedy centered in the world of the Boiling Isles, a magical location filled with many spellcasters of different stripes and wild creatures living on the back of the remains of a dead titan. Into this world is thrust our main character, the imaginative human child of Luce Nacida, who finds herself quickly in trouble and then making friends with Ida Clawthorne, who lives in the eponymous owl house with the house owl Hooty and the demon king.
Have you seen Luce?
I heard her tiny mouse feet walking close by!
It is a real fun romp with tons of creativity and a strong emotional core, all from the imagination of Dana Terrace, who created it and is the showrunner. But we would not be here talking today if there wasn't a queer element to discuss, and we definitely wouldn't be here today and talking if there wasn't especially a trans queer element to go over. And there is indeed one of those within the show. It's actually another one of those classic modern animated kids things that has a ton of queer moments and great queer representation, including the main character and her sapphic romance with Amity Blight, a character that she had a few spats with before they finally became friends, and then more than friends.
You always have a way of sneaking into people's hearts.
In fact, Owl House is listed as being the first Disney property to actually feature a same-sex couple in leading roles, to feature a same-sex kiss involving main characters, to have same-sex parents, and also to contain non-binary characters. A bunch of information that we can all attribute to the fact that Dana Terrace is a member of the queer community, being a bisexual woman, and so had investment to write bits of both herself and the people that she shares space with into her work, to the degree that it won a Peabody Award for giving queer kids a media space in which to feel recognised and to explore their own identity.
Hope it encourages more weirdos out there to keep pushing the envelope and telling their stories.
Also, don't worry, all of this positivity gets real tragic due to the whole Disney sucking thing that I mentioned earlier, but we will get into that in just a bit. First things first, we've got to discuss these non-binary characters and talk about who they are, what they do, and how well they do what they do in a trans representation way. You know, the usual stuff. With all of that said, we're going to start with our trans representation at the low end and then ramp up as we go, because I think that's the most exciting way to do it. And that means that we start with talking about the Titan itself.
King?
Yeah, that's right. That Titan that I mentioned earlier on as being the body on which the entire Isles is created turns out to not just be the parent of King, who is a baby Titan, but also a pretty fundamental character to the entire plot of the series, and is given a serious speaking role in the final episode of the entire show, Watching and Dreaming, the third special episode of Season 3. We will get into that complicated language around Season 3 in the conclusion, don't worry, it's, as you might have guessed, all about that Disney sucks vibe. But when Luce dies in a bunch of shenanigan-related stuff and ends up going into an alternate dimensional place, she meets the Titan. And at the beginning of the conversation, when she clarifies the Titan as King's dad, They clarify that King put it best when describing their species once, that they are both king and queen, best of both worlds.
I am both king and queen, best of both things.
This is actually an interesting conversation starter on this question because it makes it clear that the Titan species is well, the best term for it in our current language would be an intersex species. One that has individuals whose physical biology contains elements from both of the sexes that we are most familiar with from our planet, though of course there is so much damn variance in nature on our planet that any specific claim here is a broad labeling of things. But this intersex species, who contains bi-gender elements in the way that they perceive themselves, do still, in some way, abide by specific gendered forms. As both King and the Titan are fine using the male pronouns and classifications that our language is more comfortable engaging with and has applied to them. Those are the ones that people initially ascribed to them in the shows as well, and those are the ones that they continue using throughout the show. Now, this all isn't a transgender thing at all, to be very clear. Like I said, we're going to start at the low end and work our way up, but it is one that does challenge our normative views of gender and gender representation, by giving us a species that breaks with the monolithic view that many shows have and continue to reiterate around how all other people must share the same definitive binary system that we have culturally and socially adopted and enforced for a long time. Now, I say culturally and socially adopted and enforced there because I want to make it very clear that a lot of that being viewed as the only acceptable way for humans to be is a bit of a lie that has been pushed by certain groups who wanted to isolate and remove deviancy from within the human race, because humans have a huge range of physical and mental variances across the bimodal spectrum of sex and gender that we are part of. People do not always so easily and readily fall into the stereotyped categories that the specific hegemoniacal dominance that we have become accustomed to demands that we do, and so there is a lot of value in getting to see other species challenge that view of the world, and challenge how we accept gender and sex to be only done in one specific way. King and the Titan are, yet again, not transgender, but they open the door for people to consider gender variance, to consider bi-gender existence, and to consider ways of existing outside of what other media has always presented to them. And that's useful, as well as just being a good thing to see in regards to the fact that it is absolutely wild to have all these different alien races and species be so damn similar to us. It's just some lazy shit. Like, go hard on making this vast collection of hugely different ways of being. Kind of like Mass Effect.
50 credits.
With apparent interest, double.
What's the deal with the Hanar? I don't know. However, it's now time to move to something with actual trans elements to it that is relevant and applicable to the human experience. Specifically as we move to discussing Masha.
There!
Now, Masha is a character who briefly appears a few times. The first time being when the Basilisk V is pretending to be Luce, while Luce is in the Boiling Isles, and becomes friends with Masha, and another time that we want to focus on here being in the first special episode of the 3rd season, thanks to them. We get reintroduced to Masha when V hypes themselves up on the little detective quest that the group of friends is on to get some Titan's blood so they can get back to the Boiling Isles, and bashes her way into this museum, only to find that the receptionist at the museum is her friend Masha. Well, not her friend specifically, because V was pretending to be loose at the time and not being herself, so she has to kind of pretend to not know Masha, even when Masha feels like they kind of know her. But complicated relation aside, you get what I mean. Now, instantaneously, when we get introduced to them, we see the clues that we need to know that they are non-binary. Firstly, they got those NB colours painted on their nails, the frankly very beautifully chosen colour scheme of the non-binary flag. And secondly, perhaps more obviously than the fingernails, is the fact that their nameplate specifically lists that they use they-them pronouns.
Ooh, a rebus. They dug up a bunch of these in old Gravesfield.
Okay, so it's less of a clue and more of a beating you over the head with the fact visually, but honestly, with the way modern representation is going, I absolutely prefer to have something be specifically confirmed within the scenery and within the universe of the show, so they don't have to deal with all these little wheedling people who come out and try and say that a character isn't actually trans thanks to some obscure random bits of lore that they have dug up which they think deny it, because all they want to do is deny as many trans characters as physically possible. I mean, we deal with enough of that when a character actually gets confirmed to be trans, a la Bridget from Guilty Gear.
Happy trails, cowgirl, or, cowboy.
Cowgirl is fine, because I'm a girl.
And it's a hell of a lot worse when they don't get diegetically shown to be a member of the trans community. And that idea of diegetic is one that I do want to go into briefly, because I've actually personally in my head coined the idea of diegetic queerness, to refer to when a character is confirmed to be queer within the universe of a show, but done so in the background or in a casual manner that doesn't involve them directly having to say it out loud. And I do like it a lot because it's a manner of inclusion which allows for the character to not feel pushed into the spotlight and forced to be a special inclusion, but instead more naturally just part of the narrative and the way that things are. And so given the chance to be just another character who so happens to be transgender, who so happens to be non-binary.
Then combine that with the ear, and maybe it means hear, like to listen.
It's also a bit better in my opinion than stuff like Has Been Hotel that I covered earlier this year, where because it's confirmed explicitly within the show, that means that any watcher can definitively know the fact. Whereas for the character Sally Mae, it's not given that known element unless you are aware of the Twitter posting from the actress and the creative team around the trans nature of the character.
It doesn't count if they don't find the body.
I just personally think that this kind of diegetic queerness is a good example of how to integrate queer characters into a world without making their queerness the only thing that they're allowed to engage in. Something that people have been clamoring to have for quite a while now. Which all brings us to our third character, a character who gets a significant amount more screen time, but does also still fall into a very similar camp as Masha there, in regards to how their queerness is presented to us, and how it is integrated.
I am honored to work with Emperor Bellows.
Because Raine Whispers is a massively important character throughout the story, who gets a ton of different narratives to be involved in, including stuff like seeing their relationship with Ida when both were younger, and as part of the origin story for Ida as the Owl Lady, to their role as a saboteur within the Coven system established by the big bad Emperor Bellows, to their role as the host of Bellows' parasite while being a puppet.
You know, I just had an interesting idea.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there in many different ways that we see the personality of Raine expressed. The personality as someone who values freedom and expression and determination, who has a great amount of willpower and dedication to the causes that they believe in. been a true hero who works within the system to organize a revolution and/or style shit.
But it'll stop the Emperor, right? Then we play on!
But the interesting thing about all of those stories, like Masha, is that not a single one of them is the one that explains Raine's gender identity. They just turn up day one using they-them pronouns and having everyone refer to them like that, and that's just it. We know that they are trans because of that specific preference for gender pronouns, and also because the creator confirmed it as well, and because the voice actor Avi Roque, who is a trans non-binary voice actor, confirmed it too. But ultimately, it's another case of that diegetic queerness. A non-binary character whose non-binary status does not need to become a central part of the story, because there are a lot of other things to deal with and that need focusing on, and that maybe the gender identity they express doesn't need to be such a big deal, and can just be part of the way things are and their backstory.
Alright, Raine's Rhapsody.
It's an idealistic view of transgender representation for sure. I mean, in the world we live in, trans people are constantly having to fight for and explain ourselves to every single damn person who questions us non-stop about our existence. But just because that's how things might be, doesn't mean that all media has to align with that reality. Some should definitely do it, that's for damn sure, but we actually do have quite a few of those already. And for kids media especially, it's very useful to have hopeful representation that gives them the confidence to see themselves on the screen more than anything else. And that's my big takeaway of The Owl House. That a lot of its queerness just exists. It doesn't need to be explained, it doesn't need to be defended, it doesn't need to be fought for or pushed hard, because it just easily occupies the world in the same accepted way as straight cisgender identity does. It's positive and uplifting, and unfortunately, as mentioned, that positivity is not something that made its way into the real world for Owl House, as we now get to the Disney fucking sucks section of this video. A section that you should have seen coming based on how I have mentioned it multiple times, but also because look at all the other times queerness or the trans community have appeared in Disney-controlled properties. A recent example that I have covered being of course Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, where a trans episode that was all about how trans people have the right to exist in the world and participate in sports got pulled and scrubbed by the company because of fears that it might upset the conservative Republican Trump overlords that they feel the need to appease to right now. Owl House very much got the same stick that Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur received. Something that we know because the creator, Dana Terrace, has been very vocal about how hard she had to fight with Disney to get any queerness that she wanted into the show. Specifically talking about how Owl House got nuked from orbit not because of ratings or because of COVID issues, but because execs felt like it didn't fit the brand that Disney wanted. I.e., older and conservative. So while maybe transness doesn't need to be fought for and just gets to exist freely within the show itself, it unfortunately does need to be fought for in our world and does have to constantly be pushed because otherwise we're not going to get any at all. Owl House is great and I like it a lot. I like the way that it put multiple different identities into the show without feeling the need to have to justify or explain any of them. Disney is terrible, and I hate it for turning the third season into 3 special episodes rather than the full thing that we deserved, and for taking out a show that was doing so much beneficial work when it came to representation, especially for kids.
I don't know who you are, but you are a riot.
Anyway, that's the video, and I hope that you enjoyed it, or found it to be educational, or found it to be acceptable background noise while you do whatever you're focusing on your main screen. If all of that's true, then fantastic, it's what I'm aiming for, and all that I can really hope to be. And if you really like the channel, a great way to show support is by going to Patreon or Ko-Fi and subscribing there, both of which will be linked below in the description. The names of those in the 5 category should be scrolling past the screen right now, and I am really appreciative to everyone on there for allowing me to continue making these videos and doing this channel. I've got a lot more transgender representation to go, and so getting paid to do it does really help me focus on it and get these videos out in a somewhat timely manner. And so these people really help support me pay bills like rent, power, internet, food, and of course cat. The cat whose vet bills are at least somewhat becoming less predominant because the eating the urine biscuits is at least making them not have blockages and require going to a very expensive vet visit. But you know, the biscuits are also quite expensive themselves, so it's all a lot of money. And the people on here help to pay for that kind of stuff. So, yet again, a huge thanks to everybody who subscribes to this channel, who funds what I'm doing here, and also all the people who care about what I'm making and want to see me continue discussing this stuff. Eventually, we're going to reach the end of this road and I'll make my giant video about it, and then I'll probably just move into doing some other Media Now stuff. I mean, you've seen some of it already, my Riverdale video, my New Norm video, the Harry Potter video. If I get autistically obsessed with something and deep dive into it, I'm going to want to make a video about it. So, yeah, a big thanks as well to everybody who just watches this channel, who shows support by subscribing, commenting, sharing, and checking out my other videos, all the stuff that potentially tells the algorithm to care more about what I'm making. Who knows, but it's worth a damn shot, am I right? And at the very least, it lets me see the support, so screw the algorithm, let's just kind of maintain that. Anyways, gigantic thanks to just everyone here. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you all have a great day.